Well, Brazil's been really on a strong path since 1994 when the Real plan started. The Real plan was very successful in bringing inflation down. When I was a kid, there were days when inflation was 2–3% a day. And today we're talking about inflation that's around 5–5.5% for the full year. So what that has done is with inflation coming down, people are just more wealthy. As you showed, unemployment is at a record low level. We finished at 5.5% last year. And GDP growth continues to be in the mid-single digits. 2010 was actually 7.5%. So with all that, you've seen more than 40 million people join the middle class in Brazil. So out of 200 million, 40 million people have ascended from living below the poverty line to being part of the middle class, getting more jobs. Brazil's demographics has always been good. Over 55% of the population is below the age of 30. But today, not only do you have this young population, but it's a time when they have better jobs, they're making more money, and that's driving the economy.
Now, this is great wealth creation for Brazil, but there must be some issues with the Eurozone debt crisis because you do export a lot to China. China's productivity is going down slightly. Growth is coming down around the world. We're seeing that in the figures from Brazil, aren't we?
It is impacting, but Brazil actually exports less of its GDP than even the United States, the biggest consumer economy in the world. It's less than 10% of GDP. Among the big emerging markets economies, is the one that exports the least. So the domestic growth is really critical for economic activity in the country. Clearly, China slowing down is an issue, but when you talk about 8% to 7.5%, I mean, it's still very fast growth than anybody else in the world would be very happy to have. And when you talk about iron ore being Brazil's biggest export, there's not enough iron ore in the world, even if China grows at 7.5%. So I think even there, they'll still be in good shape.
So it's a great emerging economy. It's been going for a long time in that growth expansion. But how do people invest in Brazil? Should people invest in Brazil, and what sort of investor would it suit? More
and more people are investing in Brazil, investing in emerging markets overall. If you think about the way things have shifted to a certain extent, the developed world being in trouble from a liquidity standpoint, financial crisis, banks being in trouble, the emerging markets haven't had any of these issues. With the U.S. crisis in 2008, with the current European crisis, you haven't seen any issues.
Is it risky, though, for some investors? You know, if you're a safe investor, is Brazil just a little bit too risky, though?
Well, I think all equity markets are very risky right now. Correlation has increased quite a bit. But when you look at the top-down story, when you look at the macroeconomic figures, Brazil is actually in better shape than most economies in the world. So I think that if you want to have some investments in equities, emerging markets are definitely a place to go, and Brazil is definitely one of the most attractive.